Welcome to another edition of Red and Black, where your conservatism is not just the color that you're used to. I'm Lenny McAllister. I think this is still America, and I'm pretty certain that there's a segment of you that didn't think that was a very funny joke, but it sure as hell made you think, now didn't it? Now, with that said, there are three other people that I have here that I know will make you think as well. So enough about me, enough about the what the hell's going on in America jokes. We'll talk about that during the course of the episode. Let me get to the wonderful people here, starting with the lady in the corner, the lady of the group, who is currently in her gluten-free bastion of joy.
Oh my
the
gosh.
person who I have to fight every single week in court, no less, to keep her from renaming this show Kira Davis and the Three Musketeers. It's Kira Davis. Kira, Happy New Year.
Is it though, Lenny?
That is probably
and it's not only is it 2021, but I am at a spa. I'm not in California. I'm in Arizona. I am at a spa retreat with my husband, and I know a lot of y'all out there are like, "Ooh, Kira, how nice." No, this is a work retreat for my husband. I'm here in support of him, and I did not know what kind of place this was before I got here. Now, they took me from the airport, said, "Miss Davis, this is a 1-hour drive to this resort." This resort is this is a serial killer resort. This resort's in the middle of nowhere. Folks can be buried out here. It's desert. There's wild hogs out here. They don't serve sugar or gluten here, y'all. And there's yoga all day. Tomorrow is yoga all day.
Lord.
Kira, so she got off the plane, folks. This is what you get. She got off the plane thinking she was going to a California resort and realized she was going to a backwoods New Mexico in Arizona resort.
Yeah, like some health spa. I thought I was going to be drinking tequila all weekend. Seriously, that's what I prepared for. That's what I dressed for. That's what I packed for. And now, no tequila, just yoga. Anyway, Happy New Year.
That sounds, first of all, it's not a new year. I looked on the internet and they showed me a calendar where it actually said that it was December 37th, 2020.
Yeah.
It said, nicely played 2020. So maybe we haven't gotten to the new year yet. It's almost like an oasis, which you should know something about at your wonderful resort with a whole bunch of oases. With that said, I got two doctors here. One is over there, and you can tell, look, he doesn't have it on camera, but you can tell he got a little bit of going on already over there.
Yeah.
And he's laughing way too much. I'm not that funny. I'm not that amusing or affable, but that wonderful juice is Dr. Christopher Metzler. Say hello to the wonderful people and explain why maybe it is a Happy New Year after all.
Oh, hello, wonderful people. It's a Happy New Year because I'm drinking Pinot Noir.
Hey, Kara, what are you laughing about? You don't know anything about that until Monday night. Thank you very much.
Y'all, black people don't belong here. Black people don't belong here. Get out!
All right. So I got another doctor here. That dude is the doctor of renaming himself on Twitter, all these wonderful, crazy, meme-like type of names. It's Jeff Charles in the heart of Texas with the thing on his head that's kind of a hat, but not really, but he's got to keep it for branding purposes or else Kira will name the show to the aforementioned Kira Davis and the Three Musketeers. Jeff Charles, happy whatever year this is.
As far as I'm concerned, we're still in 2020. I mean, if yesterday's events didn't show you that, then I don't know what will. So we haven't started 2021 yet. This is 2020 and a half. I think that's what's going on here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Half crazy, half baked. Where is Dave Chappelle when you need him when it comes to that? Because it does seem like everybody is crazy stoned. So I don't even have a lead-in question. I'm just going to start with this, starting with Kira. Go. That's all I want to say.
Okay, so after November elections, Lenny and Jeff, you and I were together after the election night, and that was a tough day. and we got through it, and here we are again after the second election, and it's a tough day too. I'm going, okay. I think the only way to do this is just to be honest with the viewers, so you know where I stand. I'm going up and down. I'm going back and forth. For me, we knew this was coming, right? Like, for the most part here at Red and Black, we've been saying, Joe Biden, for all intents and purposes, is the next president, whether or not you believe he should be. I do not believe he should be. My position is that this election suffered massive fraud. I absolutely believe that there was massive fraud. You will never convince me that Joe Biden won this election. I do know a lot of people did vote for Biden, a lot more than should have, if the GOP and Trump had played it better. But that's all something that'll be parsed out in the future. Here's what I have to say now. First of all, the reality is, whether or not you like it, it's President Harris and Biden coming up. Second of all, the thing it doesn't worry me. Even the cheating isn't as worrisome to me. It is worrisome to me because I think, we want to make sure that elections have integrity in the future. We don't want to get complacent, but I don't think this is the first time there has been cheating in American electoral politics. And so I'm not even worried about the fact that we've got a Democrat administration coming in too with a supermajority, basically like Congress and the executive branch. We've been through that before too. And sometimes crappy things happen, but that's just the cyclical nature of politics. I'm not even worried about that. What's scaring the hell out of me today is watching the left make moves led by big tech, the Democrat Party, and the media complex, making moves to make sure that people like us are never heard again, so that people like Trump never come again. It disturbs me greatly that the president of the United States has been deplatformed. We should all be scared of that, whether or not you like him. The president of the United States is not a Nazi. We have never elected a Nazi in this country. The president of the United States is not a member of the KKK. He's somebody you don't like. He's somebody you disagree with. He's somebody that says weird things, but he's not these things, and this is not how we should be treating our president. And as somebody who makes her living in the alternative media and makes her living by being able to speak freely, I am deeply, deeply concerned about what is happening right now with big tech and the media. And I'll end with this. I saw my friend Jesse Kelly say on Twitter today, Jeff, you may have seen him say this, but what he said was big tech deplatforming Trump and making sure that Trump and people like him or people like us don't get our say, that is going to prepare the way for someone who makes Trump look like a teddy bear. Because when you drive people to extremes, the left thinks that the other half of the country is going away. All you're doing is making the extreme of that other half louder, more motivated. And I'm afraid that what we're going to see next for the conservative or the side or the right is someone who is even more polarizing than Trump.
Well, and I want to say something to that, Kieran, and I'm going to go to Dr. M as the guy that knows the Constitution forwards and backwards in the group. Number one, people forget that when you have people that are backed in a corner that seem to be in the extremes or are in the extremes, and you give them more legitimacy and you give them more fuel to the fire, that's how you build up a Hitler. People calling George W. Bush Hitler and calling John McCain Hitler and calling Romney Hitler and calling them all racist. Eventually, the Republican that won the presidency after Obama was Trump. If you continue this going down that path, this is what you've actually seen historically. Then you end up getting somebody like that could literally just drive the train through. And I've been on social media, Dr. Metzler, telling people we've been through worse. This is not the worst. I had somebody say that this is as bad as right before the Civil War. No, it's not. You don't have one U.S. senator beating another U.S. senaner with a cane to the point of death like you did in the 1850s. In the 1960s, we had a president, multiple presidential candidates shot and or killed. We had civil rights leaders shot and or killed, one of which, you go to Medgar Evers in his driveway.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Oh, yeah.
you go to Malcolm
Yeah.
X in front of his
Chaos.
family.
Yeah, chaos.
So let's everybody calm down. It is scary. It is horrifying, Dr. M. But number one, constitutionally, we still seem to be stronger than people think we are. And when it comes to everything with the election, moving through December, January 6th, and what we experienced then, and then going to the 20th, we're in a bad place. We're not in the darkest place. We're not completely in the sunken place, but she's playing with the teacup for certain.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, from the standpoint, one of the things that this election showed us and the aftermath is that the Republic still works. It shows us that from a strictly constitutional standpoint, we're able to survive the way that things turned out. Again, we don't, and for me, the selection of, or the election of Joe Biden is not what I would prefer or I would want. But by the same token, I think we have to look at some of the things that we did. So as it relates to the fraud in particular, was there fraud? There was significant fraud. But here's the thing. We got so caught up in the court of public opinion, we did not prove the cases in the court of law. So when we're in front of the cameras, so Linwood, Giuliani, all of them in front of the camera saying there's fraud, but then you go into court and you say to the judge, so are you pleading fraud? No, this is not a fraud case. Okay, well, why are we here again? And so from my perspective, the issue there was we had the opportunity to prove up in the trial courts, which we did not do. And, I got to tell you, it was embarrassing from the legal team standpoint. You cannot file, as one person did, a case called Donald Trump versus the United States in the Court of Common Pleas in DC when you claim the injury occurred in Pennsylvania. Where they do that at?
Well, hold on. There was a lawsuit, and correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't somebody literally file a lawsuit on behalf of two states that currently don't exist, New California and New Nevada? Can you please talk to me about that? Because I want to know how many senators and Congress people those folks get.
Yeah, well, and that is exactly the point, because we got caught up in a number of these conspiracy theories. And I'm not talking about whether the election, whether there was fraud. That is not a conspiracy theory. But when you have things like the cases that you just said, those are not states. Like, what are you even talking about? So you had that issue. And then when you have people on there talking about Mike Pence will be shot and court-martialed and death by firing squad, it just kind of makes us look nuts. So from my perspective here, what we have to do now is we have to get back to the basic roots of conservatism and stop all of this other stuff that's going on. We are a party that's deeply fractured at this point. And I don't even know that we're a party. I think we're a collection of factions.
And that's it. That's interesting. And Jeff, you've talked about this. One of the beautiful things about following you on Twitter in particular is the way you will kind of pull out receipts and say, I'm a conservative. I understand my conservatism. But by the way, you don't want to apply this when this is like this. For example, with what happened on January 6th, the whole argument, and I hate to go into this, but I'll ask you first and I'll bring Kara into it. It's the whole conversation of, if the people on January 6th were Black, how would you feel? I'm not going to go into the argument that they would be shot in the back, they'd be shot in the head. Joe Scarborough said they'd be shot in the face. And I'm not doing that, because I saw something on social media that also said, we're not asking you to shoot the protesters from January 6th. We're asking you not to shoot at the BLM folks. We're asking you not to shoot at unarmed people. Nobody exercising their First Amendment right as Americans should be shot in that type of situation. But there is something to be said about the duality in America. The fact that we had this shocking image, and we'll show it a little bit later on in the show, of seeing the Confederate flag in the U.S. Capitol building, or one of the buildings at the Capitol. When you talk about this stuff, Jeff, one, what's been your initial reaction? And number two, Dr. M talked about getting back to conservative values. What does that mean anymore? Is there even something to get back to after all this when you start talking about conservative values?
Conservatism will be defined, and we will be getting back to conservatism. That's what I've been waiting for ever since November 3rd. I've been waiting for it. The question isn't whether or not we'll get back to conservatism. The question is, what is conservatism going to look like?
Yeah.
And that is going to be determined by which faction gains the upper hand. Will conservatism look like it did before Trump? Are we going to go back to the days of the establishment? Are we going to go back to the days of Mitt Romney and Jeb Bush? Or are we going to continue with Trumpiness? Or are we going to transform into something completely different that may have elements of all of the different factions? Mm-hmm. And I don't think that every faction belongs. Like I personally am not a fan of the Groypers and Nikki Fuentes and that crew. But as far as everybody else, there's going to be some fighting it out, and it's going to settle. And when it does settle, then we will be getting back to conservatism. So I've been ready for this round for a while, and I still don't think that we're quite there yet, because even though, Trump did give a sort of a concession speech today, but I still think that, after we get out of this whole, out of the debate over election fraud, or if Biden stole the election, that's when we're really going to see this battle go on. Are we going to have, is the Confederate flag still going to have a place on the right? That's a good question, because before it had. I'm not saying it's because of racism or whatever. I'm not going into that. I'm just saying, I'm seeing more conservatives saying, why do we celebrate the Confederacy? Why do we celebrate the history of the Democratic Party? Why do we celebrate people who wanted to tear the country apart?
Think of how long it took us to get here, though, Jeff. That's one of the things, Kira, that, and I'm going to bounce it off of you two for just a second. That's kind of scary, too, because we've been making the argument of, okay, you have your First Amendment rights. You can carry a flag if you want. You can call it heritage if you like. But the truth of the matter is, it's the flag from a country that doesn't exist, that rebelled against the United States and got trounced. So if you want to celebrate your heritage, do that. If you're from Alabama, also understand what the actual history is. It would be like me trying to cash $1 million check and saying that my dad's a billionaire, and I know my dad worked in a steel mill. They're gonna think that you're a little off or you're dangerous. Where are we going, Kira, after this? Because look, I brought up something on Radio New Zealand where the Democrats, they asked me a question. They said, well, when that flag was prominent, they asked me, what does the Republican Party do to reform itself? And I brought up, when that flag was prominent in the 40s, 50s, 60s, the Democrats had one hell of a problem when it came to what their party was going to look like going into 1968. And they lost an election they shouldn't have lost. A sitting president wouldn't even run for re-election. And they had to transform themselves. They went from the party as segregationist to the party that's now going to have, as of January 20th, the first Black president and the first African-American vice president. So there's a way for conservatives and Republicans to do it, but where does it start?
Look, in a certain respect, I feel like this conversation I've had many times in my punditry career. I've had this conversation after Obama won, and the conversation was, what's happened to the Republican Party? We're fractured. How are we going to do this? And then the Tea Party sprouted up. And then it was like, we're so divided. The Republican Party is broken. Who's going to win? Is it going to be the conservatives and the Tea Party base or the elitists? And then what happened was we all eventually we all kind of melded together, mended our fences, and galvanized against a president that we genuinely disliked because he was doing all this stuff. And so here was one target. Trump was not one target for conservatives. But guess what? Now we've got another one target. So in a few months, or maybe even a year, after things settle down, after the dust settles, the smoke clears, I do think you're going to see a lot of people just kind of fade back into this idea of having this shared common enemy. Look, this is what I want to say. I want to go back to your point about the protesters on the 6th versus Black Lives Matter. And I want to just put in my 2 cents. And I want to say that I think it's total bullshit that if those people were Black, they would have been shot, because we just watched all summer long people riot and tear up their cities and take over 12 square blocks with no consequences. And we've been watching people in the name of Black Lives Matter get away with atrocities, even murdering at some events. So I don't want to hear that both sides thing. I don't believe it. Not in this case.
Ferguson,
that's my opinion.
Ferguson, Baltimore. I mean,
listen,
look,
I just said, Lenny, we've been watching for 9 months people violently rioting with no consequences. So don't tell me that those idiots that broke into the Capitol on the 6th, if they had been Black, would have been shot. Now, let me tell you something. I don't believe that was Antifa. I'm going to tell you this now. I do think there was a group of Trump supporters who were organized and who had this plan ahead of time, that this was to them a revolutionary act. Mm-hmm. So I'm sorry to tell everybody, but I don't believe it. I think it was Trump supporters who were organized and who feel like they're part of like a militia kind of thing. So that is, so I'm not both sidesing this, but I am trying to be real about this. But as far as where the conservative movement goes, where does the conservative movement go? I don't know. It'll go where the people want it to go. And I'm not part of the Republican Party. I mean, in California, I'm a registered Democrat, which is like, what does that mean? I know it doesn't mean anything because if you can't be a Democrat, you're basically, your vote doesn't count.
Whoa. Hold on. Just making sure I can catch my breath.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Sorry. But if I can vote in primaries if I'm a Democrat, and the only candidates you ever get are Democrat candidates. So I got tired of never being able to vote for anybody.
You can actually vote multiple times in primaries as a Democrat.
I know, right?
I don't. I'm not saying I'm making a joke. We're not
condoning this. I'll say this before I cut out. I'm not a conservative because of other conservatives. I'm not a conservative because of Republicans. I'm not a conservative because of George Bush or Donald Trump. I'm a conservative because I believe the principles of our constitutional republic, capitalism, belief in a higher creator who gives us our human rights that are unalienable. I believe in lower taxes, school choice, and as small government as possible is the quickest and most productive way for the Black community particularly, but Americans at large, to raise themselves out of a desperate situation and become successful and be productive members of society. My values don't change based on who's in office, and they haven't changed now. So I think at the end of the day, this will all shake out, because I think there's a lot of people out there like me. Trump was a galvanizing figure, but those people come and go all the time. So was Obama. He didn't get to stay, he 8 years and he was gone. So those people come and go. Our values will be here after everybody's dead and gone.
So a couple things before I get to the rest of the group. Number one, you can't continue to give those type of campaign speeches and expect me to not want to follow up and ask you to announce.
I'm not running.
I know that campaigns do these little retreats before they make these big announcements.
It's not my retreat, and my retreat would not be at a resort with no sugar, Lenny.
So I'm just
or tequila.
Aren't you already sweet enough, though? I mean,
Jeff, look at you.
Jeff, she does this.
You're going to be my
show.
campaign advisor.
She does this every show. I hear "God Bless America" in my head halfway through whatever she's saying, and then I start crying and give an announcement. I guess that's the way she hooks people to tune in every week. Okay, I'll give you that. It's pretty clever. I completely disagree with you in regards to January 6th. I'm not going to sit there and go all Joe Scarborough and say that people would have gotten shot in the foreheads with auto-signed bullets or whatever. But I am going to say there have been way too many instances in American history where we see the duplicity of how different groups of people have been treated. Now, I will say this. There were plenty of protests where mayors backed off and said, don't do anything to the protesters, and that was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Saw that. Heck, in Pittsburgh, somebody literally, we talked about it. Somebody took a glass of beer, drank it, slammed it down, broke other dishes and everything else. Nothing. Well, they eventually got a summons, I believe. But to that point, we've seen the intimidation. We've seen things that people have been able to get away with. I will also say that there was a lot of tear gas in Ferguson. There were a lot of instances where people got rubber bullets shot at them for walking. We saw police presences for protest a lot faster than we did on January 6th. So I do think there was absolutely another example of the duplicity of what we talk about when we say who's enjoying First Amendment rights in America and what that means when you're black versus what that means when you're white. I will.
Okay, but Ferguson was like 9 years ago.
We can go back
years ago.
We can go back 30 years. We can go back 50 years. We can go back 100 years. That's the complaint that black people have, is the fact that there's a pattern of this throughout American history of that duplicity. I think,
but I do have to cut in here though. I mean, because some of these protests, I mean, the Black Lives Matter Antifa protests, they can't really be compared as much to the riot at the Capitol. Yes, they were breaking windows and stuff like that, but they weren't setting stuff on fire. They weren't physically assaulting people.
Yes, so they were. They were physically assaulting people.
Lenny, they were pushing against police officers' shields.
No.
They weren't beating the crap out of people on the street.
Hold on. A police officer died because somebody hit them upside the head with a fire extinguisher. Yes, they were assaulting people. So that's not a legitimate argument.
On the same scale? Not on the same scale. And plus, there was tear gas being used at the Capitol. I saw the video.
We also saw videos of police allowing people to come past the barriers, which you'd have never seen if it were, first of all, we wouldn't have gotten to 5,000 black people in one spot.
There were a lot of police officers in Portland and other cities letting the people riot. I mean, you acknowledged it, but I'm just saying that a lot of the demonstrations with Black Lives Matter, and I really blame more Antifa more than Black Lives Matter, but still, I mean, it's under the aegis of Black Lives Matter. But I mean, you saw a lot more violence. You saw buildings getting torched. You saw businesses being torched, people's livelihoods being destroyed.
The US Capitol.
And here's the other thing I was going to bring up too. The reaction of the left is like, oh no, that shouldn't happen. Police shouldn't crack down on them. They shouldn't be rounding up people in the streets. But then when it comes to yesterday, they were all for it. I'm seeing them justify that woman, the lady that got shot. So yeah, there's
that's wrong
on both sides here.
And that's completely wrong. I mean, look, absolutely. Look, they justified somebody trying to create their own country in the middle of Seattle. That's right.
Yeah,
if we're going to talk about the craziness of 2020, that's part of what both Kara and you are talking about. But I think that can be correct, Dr. M. And also it can be said that we saw another example of the duality of what blacks and whites experience in America during times of tension.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with you there. So here's my thing. What I did not understand, as an example, as much time as I spend in the Capitol, when I go into the Capitol and if I've got keys in my pocket, the metal detector is all over the place. So how in the hell did these people get through with firearms, with flagpoles? What? And if you look at a lot of those people, how they were dressed and all of those kinds of things, was that not suspicious? In addition to which, Kara, to the point you made earlier, I did not buy that bull stuff about
I cussed the one time I did the one cuss word.
That's because she ain't have no gluten today. That's because she has to go without
no sugar.
Yeah. So for me, it's, you know, this whole conversation about this is Antifa, this is not, you know, come on. We know good and well who those folks were. They came there prepared for a civil war. That's what they were doing. So for me, that whole conversation, and I keep, you know, people on Facebook are just like hating on me now. Well, they always do. But when I say that these are not, and that whole argument makes no sense. So the Trump people were outside, but they let the Antifa people go in to pretend that they were Trump people. Really?
That's actually a pretty brilliant strategy if you think about it, Dr. M.
I mean, something fishy did go on, right? Like watching that video of them pulling the barriers back was really like, what the hell is going on? So I do think that there's probably some more stuff to come out about this, but I'll tell you guys this, that I was months ago, back in October or September, having a conversation with someone from the South, and he was asking me what I thought about what was going to happen in the election, and was I worried? And I was like, well, you know, whatever happens, happens. And he said, well, my worry is that Trump loses to election fraud. And I know that there's a bunch, he said, I have some friends personally here in Georgia that belong to a bunch of like good old boy militias, and they have plans. They've already been making plans to like start a civil war, to start a revolution. So at that time, I was like, okay, like, you know, just, you know, you dismiss things as like conspiracy, but when I saw those guys go into the Capitol, and I knew to me, they weren't regular. They didn't look like regular, like typical average American Trump supporters. To me, like you, Dr. Metzler, they looked different than the average, but I didn't think they were Antifa.
No.
And that's when it clicked to me. I was like, maybe this guy isn't crazy. Maybe he was saying the truth.
Jeff, let me go to you since you're holier than thou and above us all. Let me ask this. Kira brought up a really cool point that people forget about Trump supporters, especially when it comes to conservatism and the Republican Party. A lot of Trump supporters were not part of the Republican Party when he announced that he was running as a Republican. A lot of Trump supporters couldn't name 6 tenets of conservatism over the last 50 to 75 years when Trump came down that escalator.
Still can't. Never will be able to.
But here's the thing, Dr. M. And Jeff, I'm going to ask you this first. Now those people are either at the front of the bus and the train or flat out driving the train off the tracks. Those are the folks that we're seeing right now. And some of those folks have been guiding the thought leadership. Some of those people have been guiding the online momentum. Some of those people have been rallying the troops, for lack of a better term, out in the field, going into the election and even afterwards, leading to January 6th. What happens to conservatism when that leadership that hasn't been around in the conservative movement for much longer than 5 years tries to take a significant chunk and walk away?
Honestly, I think that will be one of the most challenging obstacles for actual conservatism. Because like I said, I mean, they still couldn't name off six aspects of conservatism. They couldn't even name off 2. And I'm not saying that this applies to all of them. I think a lot of them probably came over and then learned more about what conservatism is about. But when you look at the punditry class, when you look at the leaders, you're seeing people who don't know a whole lot. I mean, and that's kind of how populism kind of works anyway. It's not based on certain principles. It's just based on, you know, what people are thinking at that moment. So the good part about that is that there's a lot of passion, and we need that passion. But like you said, that could easily drive us off of a cliff, especially if they don't know what conservatism is. That they'll support anybody who seems like somebody that they like. Like for instance, a lot of them saying, "Oh, I hope Tulsi Gabbard runs, and I'll vote for her." I'm like, well, wait a minute. I like Tulsi Gabbard too, but I don't agree with her politically. I don't want
Dude,
I
honestly.
I
Hold on, wait.
There are things I like about her. She's beautiful. I like that about her too.
Kara, you
But I
know-
just don't want her to
We
be
know,
president.
Jeff.
There's that.
We know
The
that.
beginning and the end.
Hey, I'm just saying.
Look, look, we know where you go with Democratic women. We've heard this about the
I
vice
know.
president-elect.
Tammy,
I have a problem. I admit it. The first step is admitting that I have a problem.
Thank
But I'm
you.
just saying, like, you know, we're gonna have to have the non-establishment people who are not necessarily MAGA, but want the establishment out. We need more people like that to rise up and kind of temper what's going on with the MAGA movement. Because I don't want it to go away, but I do want it to have more of a direction. I want it to be based more on foundational principles rather than on a personality.
Well, Dr. M, we had that. And Kira, I'm going to go to him first and you. We had that because wasn't the sweet spot in 2010? I mean, people forget. I'll go to you, Kira, because you brought up the Tea Party. And then I'll go to you, Dr. M. Kira, the Tea Party brought us Marco Rubio, brought us Rand Paul, brought us Ted Cruz, brought us Alan West, brought us Tim Scott. Tim Scott does not win that race in 2010 without it being a different year. So what happened to the sweet spot? And with what Jeff's saying, and Dr. M, eventually I'll get to you with the same question. How do we refine that? Because that seemed to be the perfect mix of outsiders with an understanding of how the inside baseball works, why it's broken, and a set of principles and ideas that can actually move the country in a different direction, in a better.
But it didn't work, did it? Because guess who the next presidential nominee for the Republicans was? Mitt Romney. So we didn't get Marco Rubio. We didn't get Tim Scott. We didn't get Alan West. Those guys didn't get pushed through. At the end of the day, they were great in Congress. And you're absolutely right, Lenny. No Tim Scott without Tea Party. A lot of people don't like me for this. A lot of far right-wing conservatives don't like me for saying this, but I think Marco Rubio splits the difference between elitism and the Tea Party base very well. That's the guy who kind of, and I think he's been made a little bolder by Trump, which is what we need to see. That's the kind of thing I like. So like you, Lenny, I kind of get that we need that combination of insider, outsider. But at the end of the day, the elites always win. And that's why the elites always get to lead the conversation sooner or later. And that's why Trump was such a sea change for everything. So I'll let you query Dr. Metzler about this, but at the end of the day, I think we have to understand that there's going to be a wake in Trump. Like there's a lot of people that are going to come up in this Trump wake, and people are bolder, just like the Tea Party made some Republicans bolder. At the end of the day, it's still going to be a battle between the elite of the party and the base of the party. And at the end of the day, we'll have to see who comes out on top. In 2012, that was the elite that came out on top. In 2016, it was the base that came out on top. So
and so first, I'm before I do what I'm going to do, I get to query you, Dr. M, which I don't even know how to spell query, but it makes me sound really smart. I think
I live in California. I live in California where my governor uses very big words all the time to say absolutely nothing. So I'm really good at this.
So, Dr. M, if I may query you, I don't even know if that breaks any laws or not. So if it does, I'm not trying to harass you in any type of way. But if I'm legally able to query you, I'm going to query you with some caveats, some conditions on it, which makes querying sound even worse. But I digress. In 2012, Herman Cain was a leading candidate until he did a couple of things, like love him and may so rest in peace. But when somebody asks you about foreign affairs, you don't start talking about you Becky Stan. No one's going to take you seriously. Michelle Bachmann ended up being somebody that was an outsider that was coming in that took down. People forget Tim Pawlenty. He's working at a Dunkin' Donuts in Minnesota someplace. Ever since that, she took him down. She's the one that said everybody loves the 999 plan from Herman Cain until you turn it on its head and you look into the details. And she took him down. She's the one that Rick Perry split the difference between the Tea Party and establishment. She took him down. And if Rick Santorum didn't say anything about how much JFK as a Catholic made him sick in 1960, he had the momentum against Mitt Romney. He splits that difference pretty well. So we could have had that difference splitter, maybe, Dr. M, 4 years earlier. But because we had some people that put their foot in their mouths, we had Christine O'Donnell, I'm not a witch, in 2010, or else we don't have Chris Coons in Delaware. If we had Sharon Angle playing the race right, we would have gotten rid of Harry Reid in 2010 in his Negro dialect. So there were people that had a chance to make a difference. We could possibly do the same again, maybe, if we learn the lessons now, perhaps?
Well, so a couple of things. One, I'm not sure that we're going to learn the lessons because, see, here I think this is one of the things that we do so poorly as conservatives. We don't learn lessons. We try to make up lessons by not looking at what has occurred in the past. That's number one. Number two, the Republican Party, and the only reason I refer to the party is because in this country we have two parties. Look, I'm a conservative. I'm not necessarily a Republican, but, that's where I fall in. And, I've been a conservative since I was 18. So it's interesting to me about all these people lecturing me on what conservatism is. But I digress. I do think that it's a fight between the elite and the elites and the outsiders. And if we look at it as black people who happen to be conservative, if we look at it that way, we're not anywhere up in that mix. And I think particularly in this administration, I think one of the significant mistakes that was made is too much attention was paid to the so-called outsiders who in many cases were simply a minstrel show. And so I think that's part of the problem that we see here.
Hold on, wait. Before you continue, keep your intelligent thought, because I'm not going to have you insult Diamond and Silk on my show.
See, he wasn't trying to name names, and you just went for it.
Okay.
No, I would like to point out to my fellow Red State brethren, Lenny and Jeff, who write for Red State, which is owned by Salem. Diamond and Silk are also Salem family. So
okay,
we love them.
I love them as
we're supportive of them.
I love them as
Salem.
family, but there are cousins that I still don't talk to this day. Please continue, Dr. M.
Yeah. So I think at the end of the day, what the Republican Party is not recognizing is, and to the issue of insiders and outsiders, what the Republican Party is not recognizing is the value that Black conservatives actually bring both inside and outside. If you look at the structures, you look at DNC, for example, Black folk all up in that party infrastructure. You look at the RNC, that's not the case. So until we are in that conversation, talking about policy, which means we have to know what conservatism is and what those principles are, we can't just tag ourselves as, oh, I'm a Black conservative. I've walked away from the plantation. I don't know what any of that means. But I do know that from a conservative standpoint, those were not the principles we came up with.
Yeah, but
okay, Dr. M, can I ask a question? Lenny,
Sure.
I'm sorry to take over your role for a second, but Dr. M, can I ask you a question then? Okay, don't you think that part of the everything you're saying is like I'm on board. So whenever I mention this to Republicans, conservatives, particularly Republicans in leadership positions, one of the things they say is, well, we don't choose people based on race. That's identity politics. And we don't do identity politics. So we believe in content of character over, race. And so if we do that, we're playing race favorites. We're playing a race game, and that's not who we are. We don't see race, or we're colorblind, or we don't play identity politics. So I get that a lot. What's your response to that?
Bullshit. That's my response to that.
That's two today.
and here's why. The issue is this.
Lenny.
The issue is not whether you see race or you see color, it's how you respond to it. And to say to me that in
Say it.
fact, I don't see that. I don't know. But you do play other politics, such as your mama gave a lot of money to the campaign, so I'm going to put you in a job that you can't necessarily do. My friend Billy Bob. So that argument to me is simply ridiculous. But what you do want to do is to put us in these minor positions, and you want to attach Black something to it. Director of Black Outreach, Director of Black Constituent Services. That is not where the policy decisions are made. So my thing is, okay, fine. I'll accept your argument. So let me ask you, in the pool of people you selected, let's see who was in that pool. Oh, well, those kinds of things happen. And I call them out on this all of the time. I said, the issue is you are not sourcing candidates. And do not come to me with this notion of, oh, we only hire we'll hire qualified Blacks or qualified. Okay, I never hear you tell me I'm gonna hire qualified white people. And I would assume that you don't hire unqualified people in the first place. So why is this even a discussion? Okay. So that's just, that's the way that I've been responding when I hear this all the time.
Even though I will say this, when it comes to people hiring unqualified people for certain roles, you must not have paid attention to some of the races that we shouldn't have lost, that we actually have lost over the last several years.
Hello.
Then you would realize that we actually do hire some unqualified people. But again, I digress. Jeff, question for everybody before we talk about some Californians that kind of hang out every now and then on the south side of Chicago and go up the Jackson Hole. That should give everybody a hint as to what we're going to talk about real quick. But in regards to Black conservatism, one of the things I love about Kira, I love about Chris, and I love about you is that you all find the sweet spot of being bold, but also being Black and still being conservative and moving things along. So one, I tip my hat to all three of you for doing that. Number two, very quickly, because I want to go around the horn real quick. What advice would you have for other Black conservatives to be able to strike that balance as public figures to move the ball forward like Dr. M's talking about?
Embrace and sell conservatism with whatever platform that you have, one. Two, do not be afraid to go against the grain, because the more of us that do, the more the faster things will change. Don't feel like you have to be pressured to repeat certain talking points, or don't feel like you have to be pressured to use plantation language, or to engage in a lot of the stupidity that has kept us from earning more of the Black vote. You don't have to do it. There are plenty of white conservatives, Black conservatives, Latino conservatives that want to hear something of substance and want to hear something new. I have discovered that. Yes, I get tons and tons and tons of pushbacks, in the comment section of my articles, but I get a lot, but the majority of the emails that I get from the people that read my articles are positive. So yes, you are going to get slammed if you go against the grain, but you need to realize that the younger crowd, they are more willing to hear what you have to say if you're telling the truth about the Black community instead of just reciting talking points. So be authentic. Don't be afraid to be authentic. You will have an audience. It may not, you may not have millions and millions of followers right away, but a lot of conservatives are open to hearing something new about Black conservatism and about the Black community in general.
Kira, I'm going to go to you, but I thought you had the talk with Jeff to never read the comments in your articles.
Oh, I've given up on Jeff. Jeff doesn't care. You know what? And that's his camp. And he likes it. So if it feeds his soul, then great. For a lot of writers, it robs them. So
that's gluten to his soul. I digress. Good.
Look, Jeff, that was great advice. Another thing that I would say is always resist the temptation to chase the clicks. And that is probably a trap that most political pundits fall into, regardless of your race, but particularly Black pundits, because the field is so narrow for us, and there's only so much room in the public psyche for Black conservatives, particularly, that it can feel like I've got to be getting those red meat clicks, and it gets addictive after a while. It's important to remember. What I always do is I remember why I started, because none of us are immune from that, right?
Yeah.
Kira Davis is not immune from that either. Like,
right.
Believe me, there's days when I'm like, I feel the pressure to be a flamethrower and may even give into it sometimes to boost my paycheck. But at the end of the day, what I do is always remind myself why I got into this in the first place. And for me, why I got into this in the first place is because of Obamacare. And I didn't want socialized medicine. I didn't like Obama. I thought he was a terrible president. And I didn't like how people were being insulted and maligned for not wanting to have him as the president just because he was Black. I felt very strongly about what America has given me as an immigrant, given me as a woman, given me as a mother. And it sounds cheesy. And I know, like, Lenny is good, always like good-naturedly ribbing me about my rah rah America speeches, but he knows that I feel that I love this country sincerely.
Yep.
And I believe in the principles of our founding fathers, whether or not they had us in mind when they wrote that stuff. I believe in it. And that is why I do what I do. And sometimes you have to sit back and say, why am I going on this show? Why am I making this podcast? What is my goal here? Is my goal clicks? If your goal is clicks, guess what? They're out there for you to have. And there's a whole script you can read, and it's going to gin up the bass and it'll be great. Are you in it for the clicks, or are you in it to move the needle? And I've always been in it to move the needle. And at the end of the day, that's the most important thing to me. I want to move this needle.
So, and I want to get to Dr. M, but you left the door wide open. So I'm going to rib you because I love you like a sister. Kira talked about her love of the values of the founding fathers. And so, of course, out of pure good-natured ribbing, I'm going to ask you, are you talking about the Canadian founding fathers, or are you talking about the American founding fathers?
The Canadian founding fathers are the British monarchy. So I'm talking about the
I just, I always got to ask that question with you as an immigrant.
I don't even know what, I'm a bad Canadian. I don't even know what Canadians call their founding.
You're so bad of a Canadian in America. Good job.
Oh boy.
Em, I'm going to go to you because we're going to have to cut Kimye because we actually got all deep and serious about something on this show.
No, I'm going to make it very, very quick. Ditto to what both of my colleagues have said. And as an immigrant myself, I believe in exactly the same things that you do, Kira. And the final thing I would say is avoid the grifting at all cost. But that's a whole other show.
It sure is. Maybe we should do it.
We need to do it.
Wow.
We might need to.
It's grifting season. Shout out to the Hoteps. The Grifty Awards are coming up.
There you go.
Oh my gosh. There's so many categories with the Grifty. We can do a show on the Grifties. And the nomination for most.
We totally should.
Most plantation memes used in 1,000-word essay include, and then just pull out articles. I mean, we would be. I'm supposed to be good on this show. I'm supposed to be a great guy, and you all get me all off track. We're not going to talk about Kimye. We'll probably do that next week because that's just a whole bunch in and of itself.
Yes, I have a lot to say. So let's do it next week. I have so much to say about this.
I know you do, and especially when Kim Kardashian is telling you that she's sick of your stuff, so she's leaving. That tells you something. When a Kardashian leaves you because you got drama. So
you better preach.
I'm just going to leave that there and say we need more time. Kira Davis, you sat there and did a podcast or a series of podcasts on Hallmark movies, which means that you are either really bored or extremely talented. I will go with the latter. So tell us a little bit very quickly about what you got coming up this upcoming week.
Yeah, I am extremely talented. Thank you for recognizing that, Lenny. And I do 2 podcasts, Just Listen to Yourself with Kira Davis, which is available wherever you find your podcast, and is a reflection of that big speech I just gave you about moving the needle and finding common ground, sticking to your guns as who you are, but being able to see the other side so that progress can be made rather than everybody digging in. So that's got lots of episodes for you to binge there. And then my pet project, my fun project this winter season was A Very Merry Podcast, which is me and my friend Amelia Hamilton, and we review Hallmark Christmas movies. And we just released our last podcast of the season this week, but we'll be doing kind of seasonal like bonus episodes, Valentine's Day and the spring Hallmark season. It's a super fun podcast. Even if you don't watch Hallmark movies or like Hallmark movies, just listen to us talk about Hallmark movies because it's really fun. And God knows that I have needed something light this season. So that's A Very Merry Podcast, available wherever you find your podcasts.
Dr. M, very quickly, what are you up to this week?
Well, I'm trying to make a decision about what I'm going to be when I grow up.
I hope it's somebody that doesn't come on television shows and drink wine for an hour.
I think he's good at it. I think he's good at it. Don't kill his dreams, Lenny. The boy dream.
Go ahead.
So some discussions now with a couple of academic institutions about being a visiting professor virtually at first in the UK in particular. So more to come.
Ooh.
Dig it. All right. The other doctor over there, the doctor of Twitter love. Very quickly, Mr. Breaking Conservatarian, what you got going this week?
Yeah, I'm going to be doing some new interviews coming up for the Breaking Conservatarian YouTube channel. Tomorrow, no matter what happens, I'm going to release my first audio-only podcast for Breaking Conservatarian. So take a look at that. I'm going to do it even if it sucks. So I've been meaning to start this for a while. It's time to get it done. Also,
wait, real quick. Self-promotion never says that you suck. That's not the purpose of self-promotion. Try again, keep going.
But the thing is, if I suck, it's still so much better than everybody else. So I'm just saying. But I also will have a book coming out soon. I am in the editing phase. It is a satirical look at GOP outreach to the Black community. It is the Conservative Inc.'s definitive guide to reaching the Black community. It's going to be great. Dear. It's going to be coming out hopefully this month, so I'll keep you guys posted on that. But yeah, that's what I got going on right now.
And so I'll say this before we go: if you don't see Jeff on the show anymore after this week, it means that he got paid with that book. So it'll be Kira, 3 slugs, and Jeff won't be here anymore. Keep up the good work with writing the book. Listen,
nobody's buying Jeff's book, bashing conservative Inc. Trust me.
I'm sure.
Now I see where you get your tips from self-promotion and saying you suck come from, Jeff. Again, don't read the comments, and sometimes you gotta let Kira be Kira.
And did you get a stip? But Jeff, did you get your stimmy?
Oh, I'm leaving. I can't do this anymore. I love Jeff. I love Chris. I love Jeff. I love Kira. I love you. I have to get out of here so I can have some time to myself to breathe, to get ready for next week, because between America and these 3, good Lord. Anywho, we have fun. We know we try to point you in the right direction, and we're here. So keep the faith. We're keeping it for you, for each other, and for this country. In the meanwhile, have a wonderful week, and we'll talk to you next week. TCNGB, take care and God bless. Peace.
Bye-bye.